The 3rd of September 1944. Skies over Arnhem, Netherlands. A single British Lancaster bomber cut through enemy flak, its engines thrumming against the tension of the mission. Inside the turret, Air Gunner Flight Sergeant Edward "Eddie" Palmer scanned the clouds below and the black tracer streaks arching toward them. German fighters had already taken heavy casualties elsewhere in the formation, and now a Messerschmitt Bf 109 dove directly at their tail. The odds were stacked, the Lancaster heavily outnumbered, and survival seemed uncertain. Palmer's hands gripped the twin .303 Browning guns, eyes fixed on the diving enemy. Each second felt like a lifetime as tracer fire streaked past, some shells exploding nearby, shaking the turret. Crew members called positions, warned of incoming fighters, and adjusted flak avoidance maneuvers, but Palmer knew the decisive moment rested in his accuracy and timing. With a controlled burst, his first rounds hit the pursuing fighter's engine, causing it to falter. The second strike sent it spiraling out of formation. Against overwhelming odds, the British air gunner had turned imminent danger into an unexpected victory, buying precious seconds for the Lancaster and its crew to survive another deadly mile over enemy territory. The RAF's bomber crews over Arnhem were operating in a theatre defined by danger at every turn. Britain's strategic objective in the Netherlands during early September 1944 was clear: provide air support for the Allied advance, disrupt German supply lines, and weaken enemy positions ahead of the ground troops moving into Arnhem. Bomber formations, often comprising Lancaster and Halifax aircraft, faced overwhelming enemy opposition, from flak batteries positioned in towns and forests to fast, well-trained Luftwaffe fighters patrolling the skies. Every mission demanded not just courage, but precise coordination, situational awareness, and absolute trust among crew members. Air gunners like Flight Sergeant Edward Palmer were the last line of defense for the aircraft. Each Lancaster carried multiple defensive turrets, but the effectiveness of these depended entirely on the vigilance and skill of the men inside them. Gunners had to track fast-moving enemy fighters, anticipate their attack vectors, and engage with accuracy, all while their aircraft was being jostled by turbulence, enemy fire, or evasive maneuvers. A single misjudgment could allow a fighter to exploit a blind spot, potentially destroying the bomber and killing its 7-man crew. The German Luftwaffe was acutely aware of British tactics. Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs patrolled known corridors, using intelligence reports and radar guidance to intercept bombers. German pilots were trained to exploit formation weaknesses, attacking from angles that defensive gunners could not easily cover. Over Arnhem, the defensive strategy of a Lancaster required constant rotation, vigilance, and split-second reaction. Gunners monitored multiple sectors simultaneously: the tail turret, mid-upper positions, and occasionally even the nose gun, where threats could emerge from above or below. Intelligence briefings prepared crews for the density of German flak and the expected number of enemy fighters along the route. Crews memorized formations, timing of flak concentrations, and likely interception points. For Palmer, these briefings were not theoretical exercises. They formed the mental map that would guide every decision during the mission. Accuracy and timing were crucial. A defensive gunner could not simply spray bullets. Each round had to count, aimed at vulnerable parts of an attacking aircraft while anticipating evasive maneuvers. Training for air gunners was rigorous. At British airfields, crews rehearsed in both static and moving turret simulators, practicing rapid target acquisition, lead calculation, and firing under simulated combat conditions. They drilled responses to multiple simultaneous attacks, using real aircraft in formation exercises to develop coordination and instincts. By the time Palmer reached Arnhem, he had logged hundreds of hours in these exercises, yet he was acutely aware that no simulation could replicate the terror and unpredictability of live combat. As the formation approached German-held territory, tension escalated. Forward observers, part of the RAF's intelligence network, relayed positions of flak batteries and potential Luftwaffe patrols. Each Lancaster carried maps marking expected danger zones, but deviations were common. The Germans adapted constantly, shifting fighter patrols and adjusting flak concentrations based on reconnaissance. The air gunner's success relied on anticipating these adaptations, reacting faster than the enemy could maneuver, and maintaining calm under relentless pressure. Within the Lancaster, every crew member had a role. The pilot maintained formation and altitude, engineers monitored engines, navigators ensured they stayed on course, and the gunners protected the aircraft from deadly interception. Palmer's turret was the final barrier. The moment of contact with enemy fighters often fell entirely on his skill. The mission's survival depended on his ability to detect threats first, lead his target correctly, and fire decisively. It was a responsibility that carried enormous weight. A misjudged burst could cost lives, a calculated hit could save them all. By the time the formation reached Arnhem, enemy fighters were already engaging the perimeter. German pilots dived from positions of advantage, testing the defensive coordination of each Lancaster. Palmer's eyes scanned relentlessly, mentally cataloging the flight paths, speed, and distance of approaching aircraft. He knew that any single attack could turn into a cascading threat, forcing the crew to react instantaneously. His turret, armed with twin .303 Brownings, became the focal point of both defense and survival. In these moments, the convergence of training, anticipation, and nerve would determine outcomes. British air gunners were alone against the immediate threat of fighters, yet their actions could alter the fate of an entire formation. Palmer understood this implicitly. The odds were against him, yet his mission remained unchanged: protect the Lancaster, safeguard his crew, and ensure the bombs reached their target. As the Lancaster formation advanced over Arnhem, the density of enemy activity increased. German fighters circled in patrol patterns, calculating their approach to exploit any blind spots in the defensive turrets. Flak batteries positioned in towns and along key roadways had already claimed several aircraft in earlier sorties, and intelligence indicated that Luftwaffe pilots had adapted to anticipate British formation tactics. Survival depended on timing, precision, and a gunner's ability to act before the enemy closed the distance. Flight Sergeant Edward Palmer's turret became a critical node in this high-stakes scenario. Every incoming threat had to be identified immediately. Speed, altitude, angle of approach, and trajectory had to be assessed in seconds. Unlike a ground gunner, Palmer's enemy approached from multiple axes simultaneously: the tail, the mid-upper, and occasionally from beneath. His decision-making relied on rapid mental calculations honed over months of training and hundreds of flight hours. One burst of gunfire, precisely aimed, could disable an enemy fighter. A single lapse could allow it to attack the vulnerable Lancaster fuselage. The broader mission objective added another layer of pressure. The bombers were tasked with striking German supply depots and communications hubs critical to delaying enemy reinforcements in Arnhem. Each Lancaster carried a full load of ordnance, making it both a valuable target and a heavy aircraft requiring careful maneuvering. Ground crews and pilots relied on the air gunners to maintain a defensive shield, knowing that one aircraft lost could compromise the formation's effectiveness and the success of the operation. German pilots had been briefed to exploit weaknesses in Lancaster formations. Their tactics were aggressive, high-speed dives from above, coordinated head-on attacks, and feints to draw gunners' fire away from the primary approach. The Luftwaffe relied on numbers and surprise, attacking the nearest, least defended aircraft in hopes of breaking the formation. The risk for British gunners was compounded by the Lancaster's own limitations: large size, relatively slow maneuvering, and restricted visibility from the turret. Success required anticipation, accuracy, and nerves of steel. Palmer and his fellow air gunners were not merely reacting, they were controlling the engagement. Training drills had emphasized coordination: tail gunners covering rear approaches, mid-upper gunners sweeping lateral vectors, and nose gunners checking for head-on attacks. Communication was constant but minimal, relayed through concise radio calls to avoid confusion. The crew had to function as a single entity, a system of interlocking defensive firepower, while the enemy attempted to exploit even a momentary lapse. As the formation approached the initial flak zones, Palmer tracked multiple targets simultaneously. A Messerschmitt Bf 109 peeled off from altitude, diving toward the tail. Another fighter banked to the port side, aiming to cross into the Lancasters' blind spot. Every movement was predicted in advance, every burst of gunfire calibrated for timing, distance, and angle. The psychological weight was immense. The slightest hesitation could result in aircraft destruction, crew fatalities, or mission failure. Training merged with instinct. Palmer's turret movements were fluid, precise, and reactive, honed through countless hours of simulated attack runs and real missions. He maintained focus on his sector while anticipating potential crossfire, ensuring that overlapping fields of fire protected the bomber from multiple angles. In this environment, survival and victory depended on the ability to convert rapid observation into instant action. At this critical juncture, the stage was set for the pivotal engagement. German fighters would attempt to press the attack, expecting the Lancaster to be just another target in the formation. Yet Palmer's readiness, coordination, and acute observation had already created the conditions for a counterstroke. The combination of discipline, skill, and situational awareness would allow one gunner to turn the odds against him into a defining moment of aerial triumph. In the cramped tail turret of the Lancaster, Flight Sergeant Edward Palmer maintained absolute vigilance. His sector of fire was both narrow and critical. A single German fighter exploiting even a momentary lapse could destroy the aircraft. Palmer's eyes darted between tracers streaking past and the approaching Messerschmitts, mentally calculating lead angles, velocity, and distance. Every second demanded clarity. One misjudgment, one delayed burst, and the bomber would be compromised. Focus for Palmer was not simply visual acuity. It was the integration of training, instinct, and mental resilience. He filtered the noise of the aircraft, the calls from his crew, and the visual chaos of enemy fire into actionable decisions. When a fighter dived from a blind angle, Palmer anticipated its trajectory, adjusting the turret in a fraction of a second. His precision was amplified by his discipline. He fired only when the alignment and timing were correct, ensuring maximum effect. The concentration required for such an environment was immense. Each burst of .303 fire had to count. Palmer's ability to maintain focus under relentless pressure turned a potentially overwhelming scenario into a controlled engagement. Through his vigilance, the Lancaster survived attacks that would have otherwise been fatal, proving that a single, focused air gunner could shape the outcome of an entire mission. The odds against Palmer were stark. One aircraft isolated from friendly cover, flak tearing past, and multiple fighters approaching from unpredictable angles. Courage in this scenario was not a momentary surge of adrenaline but sustained resolve under prolonged threat. Palmer knew the consequences of failure, yet he operated with calm precision, allowing training and discipline to guide action rather than panic. Each engagement required him to expose himself partially to observe and track targets, relying on the armored turret only minimally. The psychological strain was intense. German pilots were trained to exploit hesitation. Yet Palmer's courage was practical, anchored in skill. He remained steady, coordinating bursts of fire with the maneuvers of his aircraft, protecting both the bomber and his crew. His bravery transformed imminent danger into opportunity, demonstrating that courage under fire could directly translate into mission success. The Lancaster's tail turret was a marvel of wartime engineering, but its effectiveness relied entirely on the gunner's expertise. Twin .303 Browning machine guns required careful handling, precise calculation of lead, and anticipation of aircraft movement. The turret allowed for near 360-degree rotation, but mechanical limitations and vibration from engine torque posed challenges. Palmer's understanding of the equipment amplified his natural skill. He accounted for bullet drop, aircraft speed, and enemy maneuvers in real time. Each round fired was deliberate, calculated to disable engines, damage control surfaces, or disrupt pilots' ability to maintain an attack. The technology of the turret provided the means, but Palmer's mastery converted potential into lethal effect. In the hands of an untrained gunner, the system was vulnerable. In Palmer's hands, it became decisive. The combination of human skill and mechanical precision allowed one man to turn overwhelming odds into victory. During the engagement over Arnhem, German fighters adjusted rapidly, probing for weaknesses and changing approach vectors with every second. Palmer, aware of the fluid threat, adapted instantly. He shifted targets, recalculated lead angles, and anticipated evasive maneuvers. Adaptation in aerial combat was more than reflex, it was the ability to integrate intelligence, training, and observation under stress. When a Bf-109 banked sharply from the port side, Palmer predicted its trajectory and timed his burst perfectly, hitting the engine and sending it spiraling away. Moments later, another fighter approached from beneath at an unexpected angle. Palmer's turret adjustments, combined with coordination with fellow gunners, neutralized the threat before it could close. His rapid adaptation prevented multiple simultaneous attacks from overwhelming the Lancaster. The ability to adapt quickly transformed danger into opportunity. Each calculated response undermined German confidence, forcing enemy pilots to hesitate and re-evaluate tactics. Palmer's skill showed that a single gunner, attuned to changing dynamics, could impose control over engagements that initially seemed hopeless, altering the course of both the immediate encounter and the larger mission. Palmer's success relied not only on individual skill but on seamless coordination with the Lancaster crew. The pilot maneuvered to maintain formation and optimal firing angles, the navigator monitored position, and other gunners covered overlapping sectors. Communication was concise and precise, radio calls relaying threat directions and positions in real time. The interdependence of the crew ensured that Palmer could focus on his sector without distraction. Forward observers in other aircraft relayed intelligence about incoming fighters, allowing the Lancaster to anticipate attacks rather than react blindly. The resulting coordination created a defensive network that multiplied the effectiveness of each gunner. Palmer's actions were synchronized with the aircraft's movements and the broader formation, demonstrating that disciplined teamwork could amplify individual skill to overcome numerical disadvantage. The immediate effect of Palmer's actions was survival and mission success. Enemy fighters were destroyed or driven off, the Lancaster remained intact, and the bombs reached their intended targets. Beyond the tactical victory, the psychological impact on both sides was profound. German pilots, confronted with a gunner capable of neutralizing multiple attackers alone, reassessed engagement strategies. British crews gained confidence, understanding that effective gunnery and coordination could turn the odds against them into opportunities for decisive action. Palmer's precision and courage had a strategic ripple effect. By preserving one aircraft and its crew, the broader mission continued without interruption, contributing to the Allied advance in the Arnhem sector. The engagement exemplified how skill, training, and coordination could leverage technology to achieve disproportionate results, and how one air gunner could influence the outcome of an entire operation. The first warning of the German attack came as a streak of tracer fire arched toward the Lancaster's tail. Flight Sergeant Edward Palmer swung the turret toward the incoming Messerschmitt, his hands steady despite the roar and vibration of the aircraft. From the turret, the approaching fighter seemed impossibly fast, closing the distance with lethal intent. Palmer's training kicked in instantly: assess, lead, fire. The first burst found its mark. Strikes tore into the fighter's engine, flames licking the fuselage as it wavered and spun, forcing the pilot into evasive maneuvers. Crew members inside the Lancaster exchanged glances, a mixture of tension and hope, while the formation maintained altitude and course. Every second counted. More attackers were already converging, each requiring immediate attention. Palmer shifted seamlessly between targets. A second Bf-109 approached from beneath, banking unexpectedly. He adjusted elevation, calculated lead, and opened fire. Shells tore through the fuselage, sending the fighter into a downward spiral. The effectiveness of each engagement depended not on volume of fire, but on precise timing, calculated angles, and split-second decisions. The Luftwaffe had assumed that a lone Lancaster was vulnerable. Palmer was proving otherwise. Simultaneously, the bomber maneuvered, guided by the pilot to maintain formation integrity while giving gunners optimal firing angles. The Lancaster rolled slightly, then leveled, creating fleeting windows for Palmer to engage each attacker. Tracers whizzed past the turret, some harmless, others exploding close enough to jolt the aircraft and its crew. Every burst fired by Palmer neutralized a threat, buying seconds for the bomber and crew to survive. The attack escalated. 3 fighters converged from different directions, attempting to overwhelm the defensive network. Palmer's turret moved with unerring accuracy, targeting each aircraft sequentially. 1 fighter spiraled into smoke, another veered off in retreat, and the third was damaged enough to break off. Ground crews in later reports would describe these kills as improbable, yet each resulted from skill, focus, and the disciplined application of training under extreme pressure. Palmer's actions directly influenced the bomber's survival. Without his precise gunnery, the enemy could have achieved multiple strikes in succession, potentially crippling the Lancaster and endangering the entire formation. The combination of concentration, anticipation, and instinctive coordination with the pilot and other gunners transformed a vulnerable position into a controlled defensive engagement. The Luftwaffe attempted repeated passes, seeking blind spots or delayed responses. Palmer, fully aware of every vector, anticipated each maneuver. His experience in simulated drills translated seamlessly to live combat, allowing him to preempt attacks that might have overwhelmed a less skilled gunner. Each successful engagement reduced enemy momentum and sowed hesitation among the attackers. By the midpoint of the battle, the Lancaster had survived multiple coordinated assaults. Palmer's turret remained operational, his hands steady, his eyes unblinking. German pilots, confronting the unexpected effectiveness of a single gunner, struggled to regain initiative. The defensive rhythm had shifted. Instead of the attackers dictating action, Palmer was shaping the engagement, controlling timing, targeting, and outcome. As the Lancaster approached the drop zone, the last wave of fighters launched a desperate final assault. Palmer's responses were automatic yet precise, a product of intense training and situational awareness. 1 fighter went down in flames, another broke off, damaged and demoralized. For a brief moment, the turret's window framed the carnage below, a testament to what could be achieved by one determined, highly skilled airman. The engagement concluded with the Lancaster intact, enemy fighters neutralized or driven away, and the mission continuing as planned. Palmer had turned overwhelming odds into a tactical victory, proving that skill, focus, and courage could decisively alter the outcome of an encounter where survival seemed improbable. The final wave of attackers descended in a coordinated strike, intent on overwhelming the Lancaster's defenses. Flight Sergeant Palmer's hands gripped the twin .303s as tracer fire lanced past his turret. Every second was critical, each fighter closing in could spell disaster. Yet he remained calm, systematically tracking and engaging the threats. His eyes scanned rapidly, switching between targets while maintaining awareness of the aircraft's movement and the position of his fellow gunners. A Messerschmitt Bf 109 dove from the port side at a shallow angle, banking toward the bomber's tail. Palmer anticipated the approach, leading his aim precisely to strike the engine and cockpit. Flames erupted along the fuselage as the fighter faltered and spiraled out of formation. Another enemy aircraft approached from below, attempting to breach a blind spot. Palmer adjusted elevation, predicting its trajectory, and fired. The fighter shuddered under the assault, smoke trailing from its wing as it broke off the attack. The Lancaster maneuvered under the pilot's guidance, providing fleeting windows of opportunity for Palmer to engage each threat. Tracer rounds streaked past, some missing, some exploding dangerously close, but Palmer maintained unbroken focus. The enemy's strategy relied on rapid, overlapping attacks to saturate the defensive network. Yet his methodical firing and anticipation disrupted their timing, forcing them to retreat and regroup. Each neutralized fighter bought seconds not just for the Lancaster but for the entire formation. Palmer's adaptability was crucial. Enemy pilots attempted unpredictable maneuvers, seeking to exploit any gap. He shifted between targets seamlessly, firing precise bursts to critical points, engines, control surfaces, and fuel tanks, maximizing damage while conserving ammunition. The Luftwaffe's confidence faltered as repeated attacks failed, their planned attrition ineffective against a single, disciplined gunner. Communication within the Lancaster remained constant but concise. Forward calls relayed approaching aircraft, while other gunners adjusted their fire to cover overlapping sectors. This coordination amplified Palmer's impact, turning the defensive system into a synchronized, lethal network. The attacking fighters struggled to find openings, and hesitation began to erode their cohesion. As the formation neared the drop zone, Palmer engaged a final attack. A Bf-109 attempted a high-speed dive from above, banking steeply toward the tail. With steady hands and precise timing, he fired. The aircraft wobbled, caught in a stream of bullets that disrupted its attack run. It spiraled away, leaving the Lancaster untouched. The cumulative effect of Palmer's actions was now unmistakable. The enemy's offensive potential had been neutralized, the Lancaster remained fully operational, and the mission could proceed. The psychological impact was immediate. Crew members, previously tense, now operated with renewed confidence. German pilots, confronting the unexpected proficiency of a single gunner, hesitated and abandoned aggressive tactics. Palmer had imposed control over an engagement that initially seemed impossible, converting personal skill into a decisive tactical advantage. By the time the Lancaster reached the target area, all threats had been reduced or driven off. Palmer's turret, though strained by prolonged action, had delivered lethal accuracy under pressure. The bombs were released on target, achieving the mission objective without loss to the aircraft. In that moment, one air gunner had turned overwhelming odds into total victory, protecting his crew, preserving strategic capability, and demonstrating the profound impact that skill, discipline, and courage could have in aerial warfare. The encounter over Arnhem would later be cited as a textbook example of air gunnery under extreme duress, where focus, adaptation, coordination, and precision combined to allow a single gunner to dictate the outcome of an engagement, altering both tactical and operational results. Palmer's actions proved that in the chaos of battle, one determined and skilled individual could transform the odds and achieve victory where survival seemed improbable. The Lancaster emerged from the engagement over Arnhem largely unscathed. Crew members exhaled in relief, their adrenaline slowly subsiding. Flight Sergeant Edward Palmer, still gripping the twin .303s, allowed himself a brief moment to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. The enemy attack, intended to overwhelm and destroy, had been neutralized almost entirely by his skill and timing. The immediate survival of the aircraft and its crew was a testament not only to training but to the resolute focus of a single air gunner. Reports from the formation confirmed the destruction or forced retreat of multiple Luftwaffe fighters. German losses were notable: engines destroyed, aircraft disabled, pilots driven off. The effectiveness of Palmer's gunnery had not only protected his own bomber but had reduced the overall pressure on the formation, allowing other aircraft to continue their mission with fewer threats. Field intelligence would later catalogue this as a pivotal moment where a single gunner's precision had a disproportionate tactical impact. Back in the Lancaster, the crew began systematic checks. The tail turret showed signs of near misses but remained functional. Ammunition was accounted for, and minor mechanical adjustments were made to ensure readiness for any further engagement. The navigator verified that the aircraft remained on course for the drop zone, while the pilot maintained altitude and formation. Palmer's role, though central to survival, had also facilitated mission continuity, ensuring that strategic objectives could still be achieved. Beyond the mechanical and tactical aspects, the psychological effect on the crew was significant. The realization that one man's skill had turned the tide of the engagement instilled confidence in the defensive system of the Lancaster. The trust between pilot, gunners, and crew members deepened, reinforcing the value of coordination and training. Crew members now operated with a heightened awareness of the effectiveness of concentrated, disciplined gunnery. Meanwhile, intelligence units began to document the engagement in detail. German tactics were analyzed, multiple fighters approaching simultaneously, attempting overlapping attacks, and exploiting blind angles. These strategies, effective against inexperienced gunners, had failed against Palmer's expertise. The documentation highlighted how skillful gunnery, combined with coordination and anticipation, could neutralize superior numbers and aggressive tactics. The immediate operational effect extended beyond survival. By neutralizing the attack over Arnhem, Parma ensured that the Lancaster could deliver its payload on schedule, contributing directly to the Allied objectives in the Netherlands. The disruption of Luftwaffe assault capabilities in that sector allowed subsequent bombers to experience reduced opposition, demonstrating how a single air gunner's success could influence broader mission outcomes. From the vantage point of the Lancaster crew, the ridge of danger had been navigated successfully. Parma's decisive action preserved not only the aircraft but also the cohesion and momentum of the formation. The engagement served as a vivid example of how individual skill, when applied with discipline and coordination, could alter the immediate tactical environment and secure strategic objectives for British forces. The impact of Flight Sergeant Parma's actions extended beyond the immediate survival of his Lancaster. Intelligence reports confirmed that multiple Luftwaffe aircraft had been destroyed or forced to withdraw. German pilots, previously confident in their ability to disrupt bomber formations, were now hesitant in that sector. The defensive success of one Lancaster had a cascading effect. Enemy formations adjusted their tactics, delaying subsequent attacks and reducing the overall threat to Allied bombers en route to Arnhem. Back in the Lancaster, the crew worked efficiently to consolidate their defensive readiness. Ammunition stocks were rechecked, minor repairs were made to the turret mechanisms, and the navigator ensured precise course corrections. The aircrew's coordination, strengthened under pressure, had been decisive. Each member understood the contribution of the others, and the role of Parma's gunnery in transforming an overwhelming attack into a tactical victory could not be overstated. The German Luftwaffe suffered both material and psychological consequences. Aircraft losses, combined with the failure of coordinated attacks, forced German command to reassess air patrol strategies over Arnhem. Pilots were instructed to avoid aggressive intercepts against well-defended formations, giving Allied bombers increased freedom of operation. Parma's precision had demonstrated that a single, highly skilled gunner could alter engagement dynamics, affecting not just one mission but the broader operational posture of enemy forces. Strategically, the Lancaster's survival ensured the successful delivery of bombs on the intended targets, supply depots, communications centers, and defensive positions critical to delaying German reinforcements. By maintaining formation integrity and reaching the drop zone without loss, the mission contributed directly to the Allied advance in the Netherlands. The effectiveness of the air gunners, exemplified by Parma, amplified the impact of strategic bombing objectives, proving that individual skill could magnify collective outcomes. Parma's actions were later documented in IAF operational reports as an example of how discipline, focus, and precise execution could overcome numerical disadvantage. The engagement highlighted the importance of training, anticipation, and coordination. Each defensive burst from his turret neutralized threats before they could compromise the aircraft, preserving lives and maintaining the momentum of the larger mission. For the Lancaster crew, the aftermath was both relief and reflection. They had witnessed the difference one skilled individual could make under extreme conditions. Parma's decisive gunnery had not only ensured survival but had also protected the integrity of the formation and the mission's objectives. The engagement became a testament to the importance of individual initiative, mastery of technology, and trust among crew members in high-stakes combat. By the time the aircraft returned to base, the story of one gunner's precision and courage had already begun to circulate among fellow crews. Parma's actions exemplified the core values of IAF airmen: skill, composure under pressure, and the ability to turn the odds against them into victory. The mission over Arnhem would serve as a reference point for both training and operational planning, demonstrating that even in the face of overwhelming opposition, calculated skill and steadfast focus could achieve results far beyond expectation. The skies over Arnhem had tested every element of the Lancaster crew, but it was Flight Sergeant Edward Parma who defined the outcome. Alone in his turret, he transformed imminent threat into decisive action. One air gunner, armed with skill, focus, and resolve, had prevented the loss of his aircraft, protected his crew, and ensured that the mission's objectives remained intact. His precision was not luck, it was the culmination of rigorous training, anticipation, and calm under extreme pressure. Palmer's victory demonstrates a fundamental principle of aerial warfare: technology alone is insufficient. The Lancasters' defensive turrets provided opportunity, but without a skilled operator, they were merely mechanical extensions. It was human judgment, adaptation, and courage that turned the machine into a tool of survival and triumph. In every pull of the trigger, Palmer balanced risk and precision, knowing that each burst could decide life or death, not just for himself, but for 6 other crew members. The engagement also underscores the psychological dimension of warfare. German pilots, expecting to overwhelm the bomber with numerical superiority, were instead confronted with a gunner who dictated the terms of combat. Hesitation, retreat, and loss of cohesion followed. The encounter became a microcosm of how training, composure, and tactical understanding can invert assumed advantage, turning the odds against one into a strategic victory for many. For the Allied campaign, the preservation of the Lancaster allowed the successful delivery of its payload, contributing to the broader objective of delaying German reinforcements in Arnhem. On a human level, Palmer's actions exemplify the extraordinary impact an individual can have in the midst of chaos. Courage under pressure, mastery of equipment, and trust in one's training created a moment that would be remembered not for the odds stacked against him, but for the victory he carved from them. Ultimately, the story of Palmer is a testament to the enduring principle that skill, focus, and resolve can turn the tide of battle. One gunner, in the crucible of enemy fire, demonstrated that precision, courage, and coordinated action can shape outcomes far beyond what mere numbers suggest. His legacy is not just survival, it is the proof that in war, a single, determined individual can alter history.